Okay, look at visual cues and how they might tell us something about politics. Um, so the first one, there are a couple of different studies I want to kind of introduce to you. The first one, the researchers brought 50 subjects into a university lab and hooked them up to a conductor machine, which kind of figures out kind of how much you twitch and things like that. They showed the subjects several photos, including three that were particularly frightening. One was a large hairy spider crawling across someone's face. Another one was an open wound with maggots crawling out of it. And another one was a dazed, beaten, and bloody man. So basically, things that you would prefer not to see on an ordinary day. And they measured the participants' EDA, the energy going through their system in response to each of the images. They also showed them pictures of flowers and butterflies and children and things like that to see if there was a difference in internal activity with these disgusting pictures and these frightening pictures and with more pleasant ones. Um, we They found that people with higher scores on the threatening photos also had consistently higher conservative scores on the social issue test that they took prior to being shown the pictures. You know, basically the same kind of study that we've seen over and over again. We have an ideological test. And then we have some sort of physical test, and then we correlate the two. It suggests that people may hold conservative or liberal positions because they feel right. I mean, you've heard the phrase, I feel it in my bones. Well, maybe it's not your bones, maybe it's the electric currents coming through your body that you feel it in. But that kind of I know I'm right because it feels right may have something to do with the physical response you have to things that are frightening. Okay, here's another one. There are the same researchers. This is Hibbing's group. The same researchers did um, um, where they used disgusting photos, not frightening photos, but disgusting ones. And again, they started by doing the ideological test, and then they showed people just really horrible pictures, poop in a toilet, a person eating worms, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we know that disgust is the most visceral of all of the emotions, that you have the least control over your emotional response to disgust than anything else. You can control your level of happiness. You can control your level of anger. I mean, that's what an anger management course is supposed to teach you. There's very little you can do to control how disgusted you are at something. If they use this electrothermal activity test, and they compare the degree of change to political attitudes on a variety of subjects. On the results, only a few of the spikes were driven by um, um, people's values and attitudes. And these tended to all be tied in to attitudes towards sex. So the more disgusted you were at these disgusted photos, the more visceral disgust response that you had towards these disgusting photos, the more likely it was that you were to think that um, you were to score high on various measures of sexual uh, purity, public policy preferences. And uh, uh, Sexual issues were about the only thing that mattered. Your level of disgust didn't seem to have anything to do with whether you supported government intervention in the economy or you preferred a more liberal or a more libertarian view of government. It didn't seem to matter on your foreign policy. It just seemed to matter on sex. But when you think about, you know, how many of our political issues right now are driven by kind of have at its core sex and sexual relations, it's an important component in politics. Um, so people who are more disgust sensitive are, you know, I mean, if you just just kind of think internally, you are more likely to discuss purity concerns into account when making a moral or read political decision, which sort of gives us the reason why conservatives are less supportive of homosexual rights than are liberals, because the level of disgust that the visceral level of disgust kind of plays out in purity politics, and homosexuality is one of the issues that deals with purity politics. Um, Okay, here's another study, another visual study that I really like. Um, so in This is an old one. In 1954, British researchers asked a bunch of British people to sort backbenchers into parties. Now, backbenchers are kind of the line. They're members of parliament, but they're not the ones that are kind of leading the ministries and things like that. They're the ones who people don't really tend to know. And so they asked these, and this is a time when television is just getting started. You're not used to seeing parliamentarians on the news all the time unless it's like Winston Churchill. And so they asked the subjects to sort the backbenchers into parties using only their photos. And the subjects were remarkably successful at doing this. A few years later, this study was replicated in the US, with Americans being asked to sort photos of congressmen who were not kind of major television figures into parties, and the US people were successful as well. Um, and they tweaked the study. I mean, this is a great thing. They tweaked the study. And asked subjects to sort politicians into parties, but instead of using their current photos, they used high school pictures, and this worked as well. People were able to take I mean, it was before this, but people were able to take Mitch McConnell's high school photo and determine that he was a Republican, and they were able to take Nancy Pelosi's high school photo and determine that she was a Democrat. That kind of sorting. Only they weren't using Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi. They were using much less familiar congressmen. If political temperament is biologically based, it makes sense that it gets broadcast in your face. So you know that the face is the most expressive part of the body. If you are an actor, it is absolutely vital that you can convey expressions through your face, and not just rely on the words of the script to communicate what's going on. If you think of somebody like Jim Carrey, who's just tremendously successful because he has this incredibly plastic face or elastic face that is able to, be so expressive. So if you're going to have some kind of biological expression of politics, the face is the place we're most likely to see it. And these sets of studies, tell us that there probably is something to that, which gives further credence to the idea that there's at least some biological component to our political behavior.